there's an isolated environment that is deployed where a thin service layer is governing API communication between the marketplace and your environment, specifically and exclusively to handle transactional information. So common misconception, and when a DevOps person hears integration, is a natural fear that I'm going to have to actually plug this into my production environment, and how deep is the integration, and how far is Google or Amazon or Microsoft going to look into my application and my code to see and try to validate that what I'm charging for is actually being performed. None of that is happening, thankfully. It's a pretty elegant architecture that limits that access and exclusively governs the transactional. We're charging X amount, the API receives that, passes it through, and there's some contract management built in as well. So up front, there's a little more work to deploy that thin isolated service layer than one might initially expect. Because if I'm a non-technical alliance person saying, I'm going to create a listing in a marketplace, I probably just have to fill out a form. And the come to earth conversation is there is a bit of work up front, but that work up front creates this globally scalable invoicing system that removes a long tail of operational issues. And it's hard to really quantify the value of that operational change until you've kind of piloted and you've seen how it's working. But up front, usually for a customer doing it themselves, regardless of what cloud marketplace they're getting into, you're looking at 4 to 8 weeks of mostly project management. And a lot of that is filling out a form, taking a couple of steps, waiting for feedback, filling out another form, doing a couple bits of work. There's a lot of hurry up and wait. And the number 2 critical success factor for our customers is a commitment to be highly responsive during the process, because our human nature tends to be, if I send a note to Sam asking him how he's doing and he takes 5 days to respond to me and ask me a little question, I'm not going to have an urgency to get back to him. I might take 3 or 4 days to respond. And the best of intentions, I think, with the marketplace teams, despite the best of intentions, they're constantly overwhelmed with the amount of demand. And so their response time is not what they would want it to be. And so having a clear commitment that whenever I get a note from the marketplace asking me for clarity, I'm going to get back to them same day. That's it's a human thing. It's not a technical thing, but that's hard. It's hard to stay committed to a project where you don't have visibility and you don't hear a response for 7 days, and then suddenly an email pops up amidst everything else, and you have to remember to prioritize that. So there are a series of kind of applications and forms where those API calls are tested, and on the technical side, they're validating that you've wired everything together properly. And in most cases, there's kind of a pre-built template to use some of the code, but there's also some custom scripts and there's some custom development that might need to be done depending on the type of deployment and the type of pricing that's being put into the marketplace. So specifically, like usage-based pricing is going to take a little bit of custom wiring because every customer outputs their usage data in a different way. So how are you going to send that to the marketplace API? These are the things that can take a day, and they can also reveal that the technical team says, well, we've been meaning to update this backend module, and that's on the sprint 2 months from now. So suddenly your marketplace project becomes a 3-month marketplace project because it gets tied into everything else. So generally it's frustrating because customers say, I need a clear timeline of what to expect. And when you're doing it yourself, it's hard to know the capacity that your technical team will have to follow through. And if there's a core product prioritization, or if there's a fire that pops up somewhere else, like how is the product or the DevOps team going to own this? And so there's a number of ways that this gets sidetracked. And part of what we try to do is keep people on track, keep them focused on the vision, check in and like understand where they're at and where things are potentially held up to keep it moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it. There's a lot of domain expertise involved and a lot of potholes. And it really varies depending on the deployment model and your pricing model. So let's say you're just a simple SaaS offering and you're just trying to do it for private offers, flat fee, there's no overages or metering. That might be a little bit more of a simple use case, right? Still going to take you like a month and a half, maybe a little bit longer to just understand the documentation, figure out how to, kind of put everything together. The complexities really start to come if you want to deploy like a PLG model, where now you have to redirect the user from marketplace to your existing sign-up flow, um, understand the details of that entitlement and that buyer, keep it all organized within your own system internally. Or as Thomas mentioned, if they have metered usage, what a nightmare, right? You have to package up the usage events, batch it to each marketplace's requirements, um, apply to the commits, apply to the overages. If you have to provide credits, maybe you're running a sales play, or you have to offer a refund for metered, usage. Like the complexities get really, really amplified the more and more you transact. And so maybe you get the listing up to get like a deal or two through it in this most simple use case, but we often see the business requirements start to really expand as more of your sellers want to do this type of pricing model, or I want to do monthly commits with monthly overages billing. Um, and then of course, the integrations to existing systems, like, hey, the deal closed. How do I make sure this flows into my ERP solution? How does this get flown back into my CRM solution? Or if I'm using Strict for billing, which is my source of truth, how am I feeding that metadata back into that platform?